ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
In just a few months, the entire global order has shifted.
Canada would be great as our cherished 51st state.
The US has started threatening its traditional allies and cozying up to its traditional enemy, Russia.
Do you respect Putin?
I do respect him.
Do you?
But
Why?
Well, I respect a lot of people.
So what does Donald Trump get out of all this? I'm Matt Bevan, and on my show, if you're listening, we try to detangle the chaos of the world so that you really understand it. Find new episodes on ABC Listen every Thursday.
As we hurtle towards Election Day, it's easy to get lost in the detail or the spin from the major political parties. But when it comes to energy policy, there is a stark difference, a clear choice on how we end our reliance on fossil fuels. And many of you have asked us to delve deeper into Labor's renewable energy targets and how they stack up against the Coalition's plan for nuclear power. Today, political correspondent for Radio National Breakfast, Melissa Clarke, steps us through the fork in the road facing voters. I'm Sam Hawley on Gadigal land in Sydney. This is ABC News Daily. Mel, we've been asking our listeners to tell us what they want to know about during this election campaign, and a lot of them have been sending questions about energy policy. And no wonder, right? Because it affects every single one of us every single day.
I'm not surprised in the slightest. Show me a single household or business that hasn't had a massive rise in their electricity and gas bills recently. I mean, they have been rising well above inflation for more than 3 years, particularly the first two of the last 3 years. There have been substantial increases in both electricity and gas costs.
There's nothing pretty about Australia's power surge. Prices are already uncomfortably high and still on the climb.
And they're still going up, not quite as much, but on top of the cumulative effect of those rises means that electricity and gas bills are just taking up a really big portion of disposable income.
It's always a bit of a rude shock when you get the bill in the mail, that's for sure. All right, so this is a huge area of discussion, of course, and also there's a big difference between the two major parties when it comes to energy policy. Our listener, Simon, who mentioned that he's in a region that he says has been taken over by wind turbines, he wonders actually if there could be, bipartisan agreement on the future of the grid, maybe, in 50 years' time or so.
I love the optimism of Simon. Yes. It would be wonderful. I think our track record of the last 15 years of federal politics shows that bipartisan support on energy policy is as rare as hen's teeth.
On any policy, Mel.
Well, on almost anything these days, bipartisanship is a rare thing. And I think climate and energy policy is one area where not only is there dispute about the details, but even like the big picture vision of the two major parties here is radically different, which is why it's not really something they've been able to compromise on because the visions are just so different.
That's right. So we'll move on to unpacking those long-term policies in a moment. Of course, Labor, renewables, the Coalition, nuclear. So we'll have a good look at that soon. I just want to look in the short term, first of all, because both major parties are promising to reduce our bills. So what's on offer, Mel?
Yeah, this is the direct pitch to your hip pocket in this election campaign. So Labor is saying, we've given you direct energy bill subsidies throughout our term. You might remember they had previously offered to lower electricity bills by $275 at the last election, which did not materialise. And instead they gave this direct electricity bill subsidy as a bit of a proxy cost of living relief so that you got up to $300 in energy bill relief that went directly on your electricity bill. So you just never had to hand out that money in the first place. So Labor is promising to continue that for another 2 quarters, so $75 twice between now and the end of the year if they're re-elected to government. The coalition is saying, look, they wouldn't stand in the way of that, but what they want to do is to look instead at your petrol bill. And they're saying, we'll look at fuel excise and we'll cut it in half from 50 cents a litre to 25 cents a litre, and we'll do that for a year. Out on top of that, the coalition is promising to introduce an East Coast gas reservation policy, which isn't an immediate measure but is part of the picture, and I'm sure we can go into that a bit more too.
Yes, let's get to that in a moment in some more detail. So, just tell me though, it's so hard to keep track of these policies, isn't it? Is there a simple answer, Mel? Who would Australians be better off under, Labor or the coalition?
I'm going to disappoint you and say that it's impossible to give you a blanket answer on that. It really does depend on your personal circumstances as to whether these short-term offerings make much of a difference. If you drive a lot, then the coalition's policy might provide the most immediate relief in saving your petrol bills. But if you're someone who, uses their split system at home a lot and you run that from the electricity grid, then maybe the electricity bill subsidy from Labor might be something that helps you more. And then there's other policies around home batteries and electrifying household goods, and that changes the picture as well. So there's not a straightforward answer. It really does depend on what your personal circumstances look like.
All right, so you might need to do your own sums.
Bit of homework.
A bit of homework
there,
on that
sorry.
one. Yeah, sorry, we can't do it for you. So, Mel, why don't we now turn to the much bigger picture? Because depending on who you vote for on May the 3rd, we'll be heading as a nation in a very different direction. Renewable, as we said, for Labor, nuclear for the coalition. Now, our listener Alicia was very keen to know more about this. So, tell me, what happens if we stick with Labor?
Yeah, so Labor's vision for the electricity grid is to have a system that is almost entirely powered by renewable energy by the time we get to 2050. So they want to change from the system that we currently have, which is a mix of coal as baseload power, some industrial scale renewable energy, a growing amount of rooftop solar, a bit of hydro, some batteries, and really move to a system that is focused on industrial scale renewable energy with firming from batteries and hydro and with gas to back that up, and gas to have a role in the interim. So that's how they want to transform the electricity system, which would be a really big change from the baseload style system we've had in the past.
And that's going to cost a fair bit of money.
It's going to cost a lot of money. Labor has for some time been citing a $122 billion price tag to get to net zero in the national electricity market by 2050.
And the thing is, Mel, critics of this plan, one of the fears is that the lights could go out. That is, that we might not have enough renewable energy to actually make this work.
The issue really is, can we do it quickly enough? The system, the electricity grid, the amount of demand that we have can be met technologically. The problem is how quickly we can scale up to do that, given how quickly coal is leaving the system. And at the moment, we're not really on track for that. We need to speed up the pace of getting wind and solar and batteries and hydro into the system, and at a very large scale, to account for how quickly coal is going to be exiting from the grid. And the timing and the cost is really where the experts are worried rather than the technicality of it.
All right, okay, so now let's turn to the coalition's policy. Just before we go on and discuss that, Peter Dutton, during the debate last week, he was criticised, wasn't he, over an answer on climate change that he gave.
In my home state, you made reference to floods and natural disasters events. We were out in Thargomindah the other day. That has been a part of the history of our state, of this country, and we need to. Is it getting worse? Well, I'll leave others to.
What do you think? You're a Queenslander?
I'll let scientists and others pass that judgment. But
really, you're not willing to say this is climate change happening right now?
Well, as the Prime Minister refused to do the other day, to make comment in this regard as well, I don't know, David, because I'm not a scientist and I can't tell you whether the.
And this has raised questions again about what is the coalition's commitment to getting to a net zero economy. But if we look at it from a stated policy position, both Labor and the coalition support net zero by 2050 and say they're working towards that. Labor has interim targets, got its 2030 target. It has to produce 2035 targets. It says it will do that after the election if it wins. The coalition's raised a lot of questions about continuing to meet the existing 2030 target. They're much more focused on making the transition much closer to 2050 because whilst they see some role for renewables in the electricity grid, they want to stick with a system that relies on baseload power, and they want to swap out coal and in its place put nuclear, which is a very different system that relies on renewables and the variable power that we're already seeing come into the system.
Today we announce 7 locations that we have looked at in great detail over a long period of time that can host new nuclear sites, and that will be part of an energy mix, obviously with renewables and significant amounts of gas into the system, particularly in the interim.
So a very different vision in both how the electricity system looks and when you would achieve that change in the grid.
Yeah, so just tell me a bit more about that because, again, the cost of it's huge.
It is. There's still a lot of questions about how this would actually work, given the federal government legally cannot do this unless it changes laws federally. It legally can't do it at a state level unless states change laws outlawing nuclear power generation. There's questions about the sites and having to acquire sites that are currently owned by energy companies that have plans to build renewable energy sources on those sites. There's questions about water and insurance and fuel sources and transportation and lots of elements as well as the cost.
All right, Mel, they're the big visions of the two major parties. As we mentioned also, there were some other big ticket items. Labor, there's an incentive to buy batteries to store energy produced from home solar panels.
Today I announced that Labor will make batteries 30% cheaper for Australian homes, small businesses and community facilities. That means saving around $4,000 on the cost of installing a typical battery.
And the coalition is proposing a levy on the gas companies. So there's a choice there too.
There is. So the coalition is saying, look, we acknowledge our nuclear policy is going to take a while to come. In fact, they've mentioned it very little, but they're saying what we need to do in the meantime is make sure there's more gas for the Australian market because we do export so much of it. They're going to tell gas producers you must keep a certain amount, in the first case 100 petajoules of gas in Australia to be sold on the Australian market, and we'll figure out what price we can sell that for, that you still get a little bit of profit, producers, but we'll put a charge on you if you try and sell it overseas for more than that reasonable price to compel you to sell it here in Australia. The effect on gas bills, they estimate for residential customers, if you're using gas at home, a 7% reduction.
So, Mel, Australians have a clear long-term choice here, two very different paths to get to net zero by 2050. So I gather it's all about what voters prioritise, whether they want those targets in the interim.
So there's two elements here for voters to keep in mind. There's the short-term choice you have of what might help in your cost of living relief, knowing energy is a big part of that. But there's also a longer-term choice here. We have an electricity grid that is being transformed right now, and the two different visions require decades of future investment, and you can't cut and swap between the two of them every time the government changes. It's kind of what we've had over the last 10 to 15 years is a government changes and the vision changes and we don't progress that transformation. So voters also need to be thinking, what do I want the long-term vision for Australia's electricity generation to look like? And hope that that sends a signal to whoever wins government that that is what voters want to see, and that's what can proceed with over the next couple of decades, not just over the next 3 years.
Melissa Clarke is the political correspondent for Radio National Breakfast. This episode was produced by Sydney Peed and Adair Shepherd. Audio production by Sam Dunn. Our supervising producer is David Cody. I'm Sam Hawley. Thanks for listening.